This week on NWP, Jag talar svenska. Hallå och välkommen to a special Nerds Without Pants. Jag är Julian, and I'm joined not as always by Patrick, but as always by Angelo.
Yeah?
Yeah. I have been learning Swedish in my spare time.
Man, Swedish sounds a little bit like German. I actually thought that was German.
Yeah, there's definite crossover. My lovely girlfriend Jenny started, and I was like, oh, there was a hot second there where I really wanted to move to Sweden. Pretty much after, well, it was two things, right? It was listening to the guys from the now defunct Grin Studios when they would guest on the Nerds or on the Giant Bombcast. And they were all Swedish. And then also, like, after I read, like, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, like, just hearing about Sweden, I was like, oh, I want to live there. Now that Jenny's learning it, I started learning it too. And we're using this app called Duolingo, which it's not going to get you very far, but right. it'll get your feet wet enough to where you can start seeking out other things. My vocabulary is already pretty good, but as far as, like, sentence structure and things like that, not so much.
That comes with time, though. A lot of that is exposure, and you can't get that just, doing this kind of stuff. It's more of you hear how other people use the language, and you start to try to imitate it more or less. The
fun part, and don't judge me on this, but it was the closest thing that I could think of, was I searched for Swedish porn on Pornhub, and just to listen to the dialogue, and I was able to suss out kind of what they were talking about. I couldn't follow everything, but I was like, I think the babysitter is asking for more money because she had to spend the night. And I was like, I can kind of piece that part out, and then sex. I get, that's a universal language, but
this is how you're trying to learn a language. Okay.
Well, no. I was just like, how far, because I'm already like a couple months into this. I'm like, how far am I? And I'm actually, what I'm going to do is I want to start rewatching the Swedish version of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and see if I can start to pick out like bits and pieces of sentences and stuff like that. Because it's a lot of fun. I haven't tried to learn a new language since I was in high school, and that was Spanish, and I hate Spanish.
Right.
So, yeah. This is actually, it's a bonus episode. We kind of felt bad for being gone so long. And also, whenever we're gone for a long period of time, things just start to stack up. Patrick's not here right now. He may be back later in the episode. We're not quite sure. Plan is to do this for about an hour, maybe hour and a half, just like basically catch up on some things. But before that, a couple of housekeeping things. I recommend everybody go check out Mike Fallick's current podcast, because he has so many. It's called Let's Start a Cult podcast. And it's about a 35, 40-minute long show. But they do this thing where they have like a survey question, and then they get a bunch of input from a bunch of different podcasts. And we recorded a whole bunch of those. So for the next probably 6 to 8 episodes of Let's Start a Cult podcast, you'll hear Angelo, Patrick, and I answering some things that don't usually fit in with our normal podcast. So that should be a lot of fun. And it's a fun show too. It's, Angelo, his co-host Deepu.
Uh-huh.
We can't let him and Patrick ever record together.
Oh, okay. You had mentioned something about that when we were doing the questions, and I don't want to give any of the questions away, but the name came up. And we were like, well, we don't really know, but apparently we know now.
Yes, now that I've listened to Deepu, I shudder to think of what the two of them could get up to if they were left to their own devices.
Okay.
So if you love, those crazy train drops that I do, go listen to Let's Start a Cult. And
if you are a fan of Patrick at his most Patrick.
Yes, you should give that a shot. And also, I mean, Mike is just he's one of the smartest dudes I've ever podcasted with or talked to in general, and it's just fun to to listen to him. Like they're a good foil for each other. So it's a real good show. Also, and I meant to mention this last time, but I just totally forgot. I've been wearing a lot of hats lately since I started at Pixelbit. Like I was news writer, then previews writer, then previews editor, then reviews editor, podcast host. Now I can add comic book editor to this weird collection of jobs that I'm picking up. My good friend Kristen Hogan, who I've known for well over 10 years now, she used to do comics and she's gotten away from it for a long time, but her current rabid love of BioWare RPGs has kind of caused her to do her own fantasy comic. It's called Hammersong. I'm showing it to Angelo on the camera, but I'll put a link in the show notes. It's a fantasy book, but it's also got like a good amount of humor to it. And she actually hand painted every page.
Nice.
So she took a long time on it, and so it doesn't really look like your average comic book. And the cool thing was at first she just wanted me to like basically proofread it, but I don't think she expected the amount of notes that I had for her, and I was like, and it's a really cool process because she basically like went from just like asking me for a favor to putting me as like editor, like in the credits of the comic. And it was kind of neat to be like, oh, this joke would play better if you did this, or you could use like some onomatopoeia here, or, this is kind of unclear, like as far as who the characters are. So maybe like a better introduction of them, blah, blah, blah. And seeing all that come together in the final product was really cool. And I'm probably going to be her editor going forward for issues 2. I'm not sure how long she's going. I know she's already working on issue 2. But I'll put a link in the show description if you want to pick that up. It's definitely worth the read, and I'm hoping to have her on the show very soon, maybe for our Halloween episode, because that'll be my stage select pick, and I already have a spooky pick already lined up for that. So, yes. That's it for all of that stuff. It's just you and I right now, so we can do whatever.
We sure can.
What have you been up to, Angelo?
Well, I've been playing board games.
I know it's only been a week, but
yeah. Well, I didn't
really. You don't say. You've been playing board games.
Yeah, I do that too. When I'm not playing video games, I'm playing board games or pinball, but not so much of that in a long time because there's no pinball tables anymore anywhere. And that's very sad.
Although I gotta say that when you're trying to look for the new digital releases on either PSN or Xbox One, it gets kind of annoying to see how much is choked. It is like taken up by like pinball FX tables.
Yeah. I might have to just like be comfortable with the fact that I'm going to have to go digital with this. Like even though it doesn't quite feel right to me, it's better than not. So at some point,
I really hope that you get to visit me in Austin sometime and I can take you to pinballs because I think you would plots.
I am not. I mean, I know a lot about it. I'm not that great at it, if that makes sense. Like, I know more than I'm able to back up with actual action, but it is a fun thing to do.
So, yeah. Especially when you go to a place that has like 15 to 20 tables.
Yeah.
On top of like arcade machines, and they've also gotten into like the ticket machines. Oh, that reminds me. So when I was in Colorado this last time, like I always like to go to Manitou Springs. It's kind of on the outskirts of Colorado Springs, and that's where they have that like penny arcade that I always tell you about. Well, they had something new here, and you may have seen it. I had not seen it before, but it's a new version of Galaga that basically it's like a ticket machine. So you're playing it to get tickets for goodies, but the screen is massive. Like it's like a good like 32-inch screen turned on its side, and like beautiful visuals, very, very poppy and everything. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of like Pac-Man Championship Edition DX as far as like that type of glitz and glamour to it.
Gotcha.
Super fun. Only problem is like it ends when either you die or you beat the boss. Oh. And I was like, this is really cool. Oh, I'm done. And I was like, I would have played this like for a really long time, guys. And it's like, I didn't want to put in more money because it was going to be the same level over again. And I was like, if you flesh this out into a bigger experience, like I would be sitting here all day long.
So it's kind of like a demo then at this point.
It's not even that. I mean, it definitely is like a designed to earn tickets, right? And I got a ton of tickets from it because I did really well on it because it's Galaga and I'm pretty good at Galaga. But I almost feel like maybe they should like make it harder to get the tickets and then just make a longer game because it plays really well. And like I got like my double ship really quickly and like it's super flashy and the boss was really cool. And I was like, I love this, but I don't feel right about giving more money to play like the exact same level. I don't know. It's a weird decision, but really cool game.
That's one of those games too where it's like, I mean, with me, like the music and stuff is a big deal, but that's one of those games where I think anybody you talk to, you say Galaga, that for a shooter has what we used to call shooters, has such a unique soundscape to it that the noises just start popping in your head.
Yeah. And here it's like all like super stereo and like high sample rates of them and everything. It's a really neat game.
Yeah. I love the sounds though.
Yeah.
And it's unique, the sound your shots make, the sounds their shots make, the sounds they make when they explode. It doesn't sound like what you would typically expect a game like that to sound like. It's cool.
Yeah, and like some of the audio cues you don't have to see what's going on to know what's going on sometimes. Yep. It's like, when that ship is going to split into the 3 scorpions just from the sound. And that stuff is really neat. Yeah. Love me some Galaga.
Yeah, I was going to say I just want to play some Galaga now, actually. I've got a few of those collections around here somewhere. It's on there, I'm sure.
Yeah, I have the PS2 one is really good because that's the one that has like remix versions of everything and the originals.
Yeah,
I like that one a lot.
The one I have. I just saw it on my shelf.
Yeah.
So I might have to put that in when I'm done with the show. Anyway, I mean, the only thing I could really say is I saw let me start with this, actually. So did you ever hear of a pinball game called Black Rose?
Sounds familiar. Is it in the Black Knight vein?
It's, actually, now that you mention it, I think very similar people worked on it.
Okay.
Ed Boon has a credit on it from Mortal Kombat fame.
Yeah.
He has credit on Black Knight as well, if I remember correctly. My memory's not. I don't have like the memory of pinball as I do of like video games and stuff.
It wouldn't surprise me because he's been there for a long time and he was there a while before Mortal Kombat was a thing.
Yeah. Well, he worked with who was the guy who did Defender and man, I'm having a bad name day, I guess.
I am too. That's not the Space Giraffe guy. That's not David Minter.
No, it's not Minter.
Or Jeff Minter.
It's whatever. They worked together on a game that ended up being really cool. I have all this somewhere in the back of my head, and it's not coming up. In fact, I was just talking with some people I was talking with people on a video game music podcast I listened to. It's called wow, I can't remember anything today. I'm having a really...
It's a bonus episode, people. What do you expect?
It is. The bonus, you get to hear Angelo screw up a lot.
I'll fix it in
Pixelated Audio. That's the name of it. So they have a Discord, and I was on there talking to him about just video game music and whatnot. And the guy started asking about pinball music, so I looked up a bunch of stuff that I was familiar with, and that was some of the stuff I was looking up. But anyway, Black Rose, really good. Has actually really good music that, having heard it recently, makes me think that it sounds like the music that led into Pirates of the Caribbean. You know what I mean? Like all that piratey stuff kind of sounds similar, but this sounds real similar to Pirates of the Caribbean, except it came out in the 90s. It came out at the same time as Addams Family, the Addams Family pinball game. So, in fact, that's why not many people have heard of it, because it was the table that was released around the same time as Addams Family from the same company, but everybody was ordering Addams Family, so nobody wanted Black Rose. So that kind of got left off to the side, is my understanding of how that went down.
Right.
But anyway, all that because I saw an Addams Family machine in the wild, and that's how my brain went down that crazy rabbit hole. It just went down.
Oh, okay. I was like, did you play it recently?
No, I didn't. But I want to see it actually. Like, I've never seen a physical one of those. Like, I've seen it digitally. I've seen some videos of people playing it online talking about it because, I every once in a while I want to research pinball tables and I find some that I haven't seen before. And I'm like, oh, that's really cool. This one has a cool kind of dynamic where there's a hole in the back of the, at the top of the playfield, there's a hole cut into the back of it. And one of two things will happen. You'll shoot a ball in there when you're shooting at another ship, or the game will shoot at you. If you get your ball back there, there's a rail that comes across the top. It goes over the entire playfield, like above it. And it goes down, and there's a little triangle here, and it's going to throw it at one flipper or the other, and you don't know which. So when the game shoots at you, the ball goes ripping down that rail and it flies off at either one flipper or the other. It's neat. You're not in danger of losing the ball really, but it's just kind of a neat little effect. So you have this sort of, you're shooting cannonballs at them. There's also a cannon that rises out of the middle of the play field, and you can aim that at that hole as well. So that's neat. That's kind of the main gimmick of that thing.
That just reminds me that I really want to go to California Extreme, like super badly.
Yeah.
Because I mean, there's really very few opportunities to see like a lot of that stuff in the wild. Because where are you going to find it these days?
Not.
Yeah.
Not. Oh, also, since you're a comic book guy, and speaking of great music on pinball tables, which is a weird thing to say, but hey, they had music too. There's a Judge Dredd one, not based off any of the movie properties, based off of the comics. It came out right before the movie came out, the one with Sylvester Stallone. So none of it is taken from the movies. It's all taken from the comic books. And the soundtrack from that is like kind of like really heavy, kind of late 70s, early 80s, like heavy guitar, like butt rock.
Right.
And it's pretty cool.
Nice.
And it's all about like him on the bike, which makes sense with that music. So
yeah. Speaking of rockin' arcade soundtracks, I ended up finding that arcade game that I was talking about in the last episode. Yes. It's called Thunder Zone, which doesn't fit at all because like it's straight up a Desert Storm game, guys. Like, or at least that's how I remember it. But go look it up on YouTube. It's got to be related to Mercs in some way, or it's just like a straight up ripoff of Mercs. But it's pretty effing cool, and the soundtrack is amazing.
Yeah, the first level just. I don't know why I didn't put that together, because as soon as you said Thunderzone, the first thing that popped in my mind was that first stage. Just that. It's so, it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's all just wailing guitars and really heavy, just riffs in there. And I think I sent you the, somebody on YouTube put the, Japanese only, like OST that they released of it because it's that good.
Yeah.
And it has an arrangement of that first track, which is also great. And it goes on for a full 7 minutes because Japan and butt rock. So.
Right. I was listening to the, it's just gonna be this type of episode, but, I was listening to the latest 8-4 podcast, and it was their TGS special, and they had, Chris Kohler on there. You know, he's like one of the big, well-known collector guys. And he was talking about some of the merch that he got. And apparently Square released an album that's nothing but arrangements of Battle on the Big Bridge.
I believe this. I mean, that's a great song.
Yeah.
Just all different arrangements, all different people takes on it.
Well, and from different games, because that's appeared in so many games. Like, I mean, I hadn't mentioned it, but I was going to talk about Final Fantasy XIV a little bit, but I did the oh, that's right. I cut that from the episode. We talked about it, but it didn't make it into the show. I did this really long quest line in 14 a while back where you end up fighting Gilgamesh. And so it was the 14 arrangement of Battle on the Big Bridge when I finally got to that fight. And it's like, you know, I don't have the affinity for 5 that a lot of people do, but that sure is a good track.
It really is. Yeah, we talked about 5 when we talked about the soundtrack. Way back on our, what was it? We did a music episode of some kind with, we had a guest on there.
Or, well, you might be thinking about the Final Fantasy episode that we did with Erica Sabo.
That's what I'm thinking.
We had a whole music section.
Right, we had a music section. That's what it was. And I think I had mentioned then that the Final Fantasy V soundtrack is very intentionally more lighthearted, more cheesy in a way. Like the whole game kind of is. Right. But it's fun.
And I think, I'm wondering if maybe the versions that we've had here just have been inferior as far as the music goes, because I remember playing it on the PlayStation and thinking the music was straight up bad.
Really?
And then I remember thinking that it was better on the GBA version, but I wonder if I pop in my Super Famicom cart, if it's going to be like, oh, this is how it was supposed to sound the whole time, and they've just never recreated it well.
Going way back to, again, the 90s, I believe we're talking 99 here, when I first discovered that emulators were a thing, I did get a hold of a copy of 5, because in my, as far as I knew, the game was never released here, was never going to be released here. The only way I was ever going to be able to play it was to get a ROM that somebody had hacked and translated, which was a thing. You know, even that early in the whole thing. And then later on, after Final Fantasy did its thing that it does, they did release 5 on the PlayStation, and I bought it. I would like to point out. Playing that, it sounded pretty much the same as it did on the PlayStation.
It may just be one of my least favorite soundtracks then.
It was also emulated. Keep that in mind. And we're talking fairly early emulation here.
Yeah.
ZSNES.
Anyway. It's hard to say. Well, I guess jumping off of that, I did want to talk a little bit about Final Fantasy XIV. And I wish Patrick was here, but this is still going to work. So my friend Shannon and I finally got we got through the filler content from the ending of A Realm Reborn, and we officially got into Heavensward, which was the first expansion.
Yeah.
And it made me wish, not for the first time, mind you, that it was an offline game and it was just like a mainline single-player Final Fantasy.
Right.
Because I would argue that the overall storyline of 14 is excellent. Better than 11 for sure, but might be one of the better overall Final Fantasy stories. And I was imagining, like, if this was a single player game, like, you have this huge cast of interesting characters, and I can see some of them being supporting characters, some of them being party characters, maybe some being guests in your party. And, you know, like, it's been a long time since a Final Fantasy game had, like, a huge cast of characters. They've kind of been trying to stick to, like, 6, right? Or even fewer sometimes. In pretty much since 7. You know, it's kind of been that way.
Right.
But there's a really cool thing that happens. Okay, and this is neat too, Angelo. There are 90 minutes worth of cutscenes leading into Heavensward. It actually tells you, hey, you're not going to be able to get away from this for a while. Do you have time to go through these cutscenes?
You might want to get some snacks.
Yes. And that's really neat. I mean, you can always skip cutscenes and then go look at them later if you're like pressed for time or whatever, but I had the time and everything, and they're very excellent cutscenes. But the thing is that it does this really cool thing of basically saying goodbye to a lot of the characters from A Realm Reborn and the areas of A Realm Reborn and saying, no, you have to go to the areas of Heavensward now. And I can imagine if this was a single player game, you know, you would be stuck there until you were done with Heavensward, where obviously it's an online game. So as soon as you get there, you can teleport back to wherever you want to go.
Right.
Even though storyline wise, that wouldn't make any sense. The reason I'm saying all of this, and the reason I find it so interesting, is because Square Enix has recently said that they want to do fewer tentpole games, but they want to extend the lives of those games. Right. So like 15 is like their perfect example where they've got the downloadable content and they're adding the multiplayer and they've got the free to play phone game.
And they're finishing the game.
Yeah. And apparently they're going to put even more story into it next year. And they want to do all this stuff. And basically, like, the way they're talking, we may not see, like, them even announce a Final Fantasy XVI for like 3 or 4 years because they just want to milk this one as best they can. I think that's a bad idea. But if they want to do it, they should actually look at the way they handle their online games. You know, so for 15, they've done like episode Prompto, episode Gladiolus, episode Ignis, right? And you pay for those. I would argue that those should probably be free updates while you're waiting for a paid expansion that takes you to like a new area that isn't reusing old assets and stuff like that. Maybe strips away like some of the characters and you have new characters in your party. Things like that. Things to really freshen it up. And that's really how Heavensward feels, where it's like, this is a whole new crew of people I'm running with. Like, it's a whole new area, brand new monsters, you know, brand new jobs. Like it's a whole bunch of new. And if this was a single player game, I could totally see where it's like, you know, this would be like the dark middle chapter kind of thing, right? But they could definitely do that with 15, where it's like, okay, we got these free little story tidbit things to keep you going so you don't trade the game in, but then bam, here's a $30 content expansion, right? With like new game mechanics, new monsters, you know, new stuff that's in the old areas, but also places you've never been before. And I think that would be the smarter way to do it, but, you know, Square doesn't listen to me.
Well, I also wonder, like, what is the point of adding, like, I remember somebody saying they're adding hunts and they're adding story that takes place before the end of the game, and I'm like, so they expect people to beat the game, then go back and play earlier parts of the game? Is that like a big thing now? I don't really understand.
If I remember correctly, I think you can go back to... No, that's not it. I think they said when they were going to like redo that chapter 12 or 13 or whatever, the really bad one, that they were going to have it to where you could access it from the menu. I haven't updated the game, so I couldn't say how they implemented it, or if they even did implement that. I'm not sure if they actually did that yet. I could see myself, because I'm stupid like this, rebuying the game for Xbox One because I need all the versions of the game, and because I have a sickness, but waiting for like a complete edition for the Xbox One and then replaying through the game with that stuff in there. Even though it's one of my least favorite Final Fantasy games. But I'd probably like put it on easy mode and just like enjoy the spectacle of the visuals, because that is pretty awesome. And I do like the characters. I just didn't like the combat or the world or, large swaths of the story.
So you liked it, but you didn't like it, is what you just said.
I think it's a good game. It's, my issues with it are very personal. Which I reflected in my review. I honestly, I could rewrite that game and I think it would be a much more interesting game. It's like, to me, like the one Final Fantasy game that didn't need to do the whole, like, let's save the world thing, but it does. Mm-hmm. And I think that was a mistake. I think they should have kept it like this very simple road trip story and like really taken a lot of that drama out of there. Cause a lot of it doesn't even work. Like, there's this evil empire, but they kind of never do anything overtly evil. You actually pal around with them a lot. And also, life doesn't seem that bad for anybody under the empire. So they really just exist to keep you from certain areas sometimes. And it's like, all right, this is a toothless empire. This is not Emperor Gestalt from Final Fantasy VI, like really trampling people under his boot, right? Like, I don't know.
There's no Kafka here.
Exactly.
Right.
I mean, that game really is the characters for me. It really boils down to that. But it's good that those characters are so excellent, because that's really why I was keeping going.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I guess it depends on the game, but in a lot of ways, in a lot of the games, that is the draw, is the characters, or at least they want it to be the draw.
Yeah.
Like, you can tell they're going for that. Like with 8, I give 8 a hard time, right? I give 8 a lot of hard time, but I think even more so than 7, that's when they started to say, we want to make a very character-driven story here. I don't. Do
you like the characters in 8 though?
No, I don't, but I think that's what they were trying to do.
Right.
I think when you look at that, even more than the other ones, like I think the other ones were characters in service of a story, even the good ones, even 6. Mm-hmm. Whereas this was, well, we really want to make this about the characters more than anything else.
Yeah.
And I don't think it worked, because I think they were playing on tropes that just did not. Well, also localization was iffy on 8, but I think that had a little bit to do with it. But, they were playing on a lot of tropes that just weren't established here. So
yeah,
it kind of fell flat.
My least favorite casts of Final Fantasy are 8 and 12. Now that I'm replaying 12, I'm like, these characters just don't do it for me, except for Balthier, who has like all of the personality. Like, everybody else is just very blank, and Balthier is the one who's kind of like, okay, this guy knows what's what. Mm-hmm. So to segue into that, and then I don't have much else, but there is a new Netflix show called Dad of Light. And I'm very happy that you hadn't heard of this, because I can now explain it to you.
Okay.
It is a Japanese dramedy. Like, it's a drama, but it's also got comedy. It's a live action. It is about a young man who has never related to his father growing up. Like, they've just never had that type of relationship, except when he was a kid and his dad finally broke down and bought him Final Fantasy III for the Famicom. And both he and the dad got into Final Fantasy III for like a split second. Like, that's what they had in common.
Okay.
But then his dad got promoted to management, and he's like your stereotypical like Japanese salaryman. And from that day on, like, they just diverged and just have not talked very much at all for basically the guy's, like, most of his life. So his dad suddenly quits his job at the age of 60, much to the surprise of like everybody. He won't say why he quit. Like, he's a very reserved person, keeps a lot of stuff inside. As a retirement present, but also as a way to finally understand his father, the son buys him a PS4 and Final Fantasy XIV and decides to befriend his father in the game without revealing his identity, to try to learn about his dad online. And it's amazing.
So on Netflix?
This is on Netflix, and it's only 8 episodes, and they're like 30-minute episodes. I'm about halfway through. So there's all the live action parts, obviously, but then when they go to the game, I don't know if you ever saw like the World of Warcraft episode of South Park, where they do like basically they're using the in-game assets, but they're doing like specialized animations to make the characters basically make it more dynamic for a viewer.
Gotcha.
And even though like all of the players are typing to communicate, they're voiced like an anime. And so that's all lip synced and everything. So obviously that's not the way that the game is in real life. Right. But it's surprisingly accurate. Like they're using like almost the entire soundtrack for the show is Final Fantasy XIV. There's like little bitty funny bits where like basically every episode, the main character's name is Akio. Something that's happening in real life, like usually with work, almost always coincides with what's going on in the game. And so there's a part where like his boss asks him to get to the bottom of why like the new employees are having trouble at the office. And so after the boss tells him that, Akio looks up and then you hear like the quest music from 14.
That's good.
And then when he finally gets to the bottom of it, you hear the quest completion music. And I was like, that's neat. That's really cool.
That's cute.
But I say this also saying, and take this with a grain of salt because everybody knows that I'm like the biggest crybaby of Nerds Without Pants. This show hits me in multiple feels on every episode. Like the first episode, I was like fighting to keep myself from losing it because it's like, here's a kid who like has grown up playing all of Final Fantasy, right? That's me. You know, even though this kid looks way younger, like he looks like he's like 22 and that the math there doesn't quite.
Right. If his dad retired at 60.
Well, no, but also if he was playing Final Fantasy III in second grade, like that puts him at like 3 to 4 years younger than us and not 15 years younger than us. But anyway, so, you know, I can relate to the character there. He also has trouble relating to people in his office because he's very introverted. He's a nerd. But then the stuff with his dad just like hits me really hard. Just the idea of not having anything in common with your father, trying to find something to relate to him with. And then also being stymied almost at every turn because it's very hard, even online, for him to get anything out of his dad. And then just little things like, oh, like the dad and the mom, like they have this complicated relationship, but at the end of the day, they still love each other. Like I'm like close to bawling on every episode. It's insane. But it's a fantastic show. And, you know, when I first heard about it, I was like, this is just going to be like a full-on commercial for Final Fantasy XIV. But it's not. Somehow they do it in a not skeevy way. And it's amazing. Like, if they did this for World of Warcraft, right, like the first thing you would think is, oh, Activision must not be happy with the flagging subscription numbers, so they have to like do this thing to drum up some interest in it again, right? But you don't get that feeling from the show at all. And I highly recommend checking it out. Honestly, Angelo, for you, like I know you don't have Netflix, this would be worth like getting a month-long subscription and then watching it with your kids.
Well, I have to get Netflix anyway because Castlevania. So,
that too. And also Stranger Things comes back next month.
Ooh.
So maybe wait for that and then just like marathon all of that and then you can cut it off again. But like I think it would be a really cool thing for you to watch with your kids. I also think, I don't mean to go on about this too long, but there's something very important, and I in no way do I claim to be an expert on Japanese culture, but I know what I know gleaned from media that I've consumed, talking to people who know people in Japan and stuff like that, or just hearing the way that people who live in Japan talk about the Japanese. And I know that the idea of playing video games past a certain age is super frowned upon there, like way more than it's ever been here. So the idea of not only like, you know, this person who's in his 20s still playing video games, but also getting his dad involved, I think is very powerful. But then also the fact that, you know, as far as I can tell, especially with like these salarymen, like they kind of, and they say it in the show, it's like, yeah, you know, they kind of ignore their family when things are going well. And then when things are going bad, that's when they're nice to their family. And, you know, otherwise, like, you don't really know your father. And so I think it's really interesting to have a show in Japan that's solely about a son and his father trying to connect, because that seems to be something that just doesn't happen over there very often.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very important show, and I really love it, and I can't recommend it enough, even if it makes me want to bawl my eyes out constantly.
I will have to keep that in mind.
Yeah. So many feels.
Yeah. So, I played board games.
Yes, you did.
But yeah, I want to check that out. That sounds real neat. Let's see. I played 2. One I was waiting to come out, and I played it. Maybe I already talked about it, actually, now that I think about it. Maybe I just talked about it on Twitter a whole lot. I don't know. Great Western Trail. So,
you haven't talked about that on here.
Okay, that is one that I picked up for myself. I will try to give you the gist of it. It is, you get a player board with a whole bunch of, it has your basic abilities on it, tells you what you can and can't do, that sort of thing. The whole point of the game is you start at the bottom of the Great Western Trail, which is, you're running cattle up north to the trains to ship them off, right?
Okay.
That's the point. You're whatever they called it when...
Cattle rancher?
Yeah, sure. Or cowboys. Really. You're a cowboy. So along the trail, there's settlements and hazards and things like that. There's a bunch of places where the path diverges into 2 separate spots, and up you go. Now, the thing that makes this really interesting is all of those, there's all these little empty squares all over the place, and you can move, when you start, you can only move, you have the ability to move 3 panels at a time. And that only counts occupied panels. So as you're looking at the board all along this trail, any of those squares that have something in them, a building, count as, an occupied space or a tile that you'd have to count when you're moving.
Okay.
If this makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm trying, let me not get too rules intensive, but the point is, because there's a whole bunch of empty ones, the whole point of the game is you can build your own little spaces on this trail. And that becomes interesting because what you're trying to do is have a hand of different types of cattle, because you have a hand of cards as well, so that when you get up there, you have a variety to sell. Because what you're actually doing is you're not selling these cattle to turn into beef, you're selling them to breed. So when you sell them to a city, that city does not want multiples of the same breed of cow. They want different breeds of cows. Okay? So your hand might have 3 Jersey cows, which will become the bane of your existence. You will hate those. A Guernsey, a Dutch belt, or something like that. I'm actually learning these names as the result of playing this game, which is ridiculous. And I'm starting to spot them, in the wild. That's a Dutch belt. It's got the belt around the middle. I know what that is now. It's a little weird.
Who says your hobbies can't teach you anything?
Right. Yeah. Now I know what cattle breeds are. Anyway, that's the simple part of the game, right? There's places where the trail splits, and there can be hazards on those, and different conditions that you can even manipulate in a way can make more hazards appear or make the hazards go away. You can trade with natives. There's, Native American teepees in one spot, and you can trade with them. All of this to the sole purpose of the more cattle you trade away, the more points you get, because, it's a point chasing game just like anything else. And, whoever finishes the most points wins. Now, that is a very simple way to explain this game. You are, as you're moving, hiring cowboys, you're hiring engineers, because you're also managing your ability to ship these. You have to basically be able to ship these cows further and further out, because once you've gotten them to one particular city, that city doesn't need them anymore. So you have to be able to move. There's a little train piece, and you move that further down to show how much further down you can go and what additional cities you can now reach. You can occupy. You can actually send some of your people that you've hired out to be station masters. You can recruit builders. The more builders and cowboys and engineers you have on your player board, because they actually become little tiles that you put on your player board, the better you get at certain things. Sometimes you trade them. You're better at getting better breeds of cattle, the more cowboys you have. You can build hazards that are towns that other people will have to pay you every time they go through your town. You can do crazy stuff like that. There's so much going on that there's a lot of different strategies to playing this game, and I played it with 2 other people, and I was doing one thing, I was really focusing on the trains and my trains and the engineers and that sort of thing, and one of the other guys was focusing on the exact opposite thing. He was focusing on cowboys and making sure he could get these very valuable, very desirable breeds of cattle, so that when he was making his trades and at the end of the game, he was getting so much money and a lot more. He was getting his points that way. By the end of the game, we were within 1 point of each other.
Wow.
We played the game completely differently. And there were other people who were trying different strategies as well that didn't get near us. Him and I were like in first and second place. And I just think that's like a really cool thing that you can take a game like that, play it completely different ways, and end up so close at the end. Like to me, that's a sign of a really well-developed game.
Yeah.
So, and we didn't even really get into building. Like I built a couple buildings here and there, and everybody else was kind of like dabbling in that, but nobody really leaned into hiring carpenters and building buildings everywhere, because that's another strategy you can take that will get you victory points and things like that. So that was really fun. That was really cool.
That particular game, the way you're describing it, sounds like I would prefer to play it in video game form. Like that just seems like a lot to keep track of.
But that's the term that board gamers uses. It's fiddly. There's a lot of pieces. There's a lot of thinking going on, and there's a lot of room to misinterpret rules and make mistakes. Mm-hmm. Because of how many pieces are sort of moving in tandem with each other. We had screwed up the first time we played you want to trade with the Native Americans, right? And the longer you go without doing that, the more of them appear on the board. And it's not really them, it's more of a tracker, right? Mm-hmm. And to the point where they were like all over the place, and we were like, we must be doing something wrong. We looked it up and we were. We thought you had to go to a certain place to trade with them, whereas in reality, there were several spaces scattered all over the board that allowed you to trade with the natives. And every time you did that, one of the tiles came off. It's like, oh, wait, that makes a whole lot more sense. We were doing that completely wrong. And we had scoured the rule book. Like, we had spent a lot of time making sure we'd gotten this right. And, when you're playing a video game, when you try to do something like that, the video game goes, no, you can't do that. Or when you put your character in a space where there's multiple options available to you, video games are great about saying, okay, you're here, here's what you can do in this particular spot.
Right.
Board games are not like that.
Yeah. and like when I play like complicated games like Catan or something like that, I will almost always forget all the things that I can do at any given moment, mm-hmm. and to my personal detriment, like every time,
yeah.
Oh, I should have done this 2 turns ago. It's too late now.
Yeah. And there's ones like I would say, I don't want to bust on you, but like Catan is a pretty good one for getting used to that, right? Like if you're mm-hmm. not used to playing these more complicated ones, playing Catan, playing Splendor. I don't know if we talked about Splendor. I don't think we did.
Doesn't ring a bell.
The Splendors are really neat sort of, hey, here's modern board games that are not Monopoly or Risk, and here's kind of how these games work now. Because they both have that sort of element of teaching you to remember what you can do in a given situation, mm-hmm. all of your options. And it's a skill. Once you sort of get your head around that skill, you're able to grab more games and you're able to store kind of more options in your head. It is something you can teach yourself. It's just a lot of times, because people haven't played games like this, they haven't really had to use that skill. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do we want to do the other one since we're here?
Yeah, if you want.
I could do that.
We got some time.
So the other one was Lords of Waterdeep. And if Waterdeep sounds familiar to anyone, it's because it's part of it's a famous place sort of for people who play D&D.
Okay.
I think it's part of Forgotten Realms, if that sounds about right. I'm not a big D&D person, so I might be screwing this up. But I know it's a big deal. Like people who play that and are really into the lore and into like sort of the novels or the universes that have spun out of D&D know exactly what that means and know what all these characters in the games are. For me, it was just basically a worker placement game, where you started off as a Lord of Waterdeep, right? There's a deck of cards and everybody gets one, and on that card it tells you, hey, at the end of the game, you get bonuses if you've done these sorts of things, right? So basically, like, as a lord, this is what you're interested in investing in, and you will win the game if you invest in that well. That kind of thing, right? That sounds pretty dry. But here's what you're actually doing, right? There are quests that come up. And, they're like, go get the thingamabob or whatever it is, right? So, but you're a lord. You don't sully your hands by going into dungeons and slapping goblins around for gold nuggets. You make other people do your dirty work for you. So here's how you play this game is you have your agents, and there's these places on the board where you can place them. It's worker placement, right? So I want to activate this space. Well, that's how I hire mages, right? Or magicians. And I can go to this space to hire fighters, and this one to hire rogues. You get the idea, right?
Yeah.
And for each quest, you need a certain amount of these things. You go there, you recruit them, you cash them in to do the quest. You have done the quest. That goes off to the side, and you get the loot plus sometimes some extra abilities that go along with it, things like that. That's the gist of the game. Like, that is bare bones how the game works. Now, of course, if it was just you just doing this ad nauseum, it'd be boring, but it gets interesting because as a Lord of Waterdeep, you have some influence in how the city kind of grows and changes over time, and you manifest that by actually building additional spaces on this board. So wizards, for example, are hard to come by, right? Like, there's one space for you to get a wizard, and you only get one wizard. With a lot of these places, like with the fighters, you'd get two, and I think with priests, you get two as well. Or is it rogues? It doesn't matter. You get the idea.
Yeah.
So wizards are immediately kind of a hard commodity to get. Because once somebody's in that space, nobody else can go there for the end of the round, and there's only like 7 or 8 rounds in the game. So what you might want to do is send one of your agents down to the building yard and build a building that also produces wizards. And then you can go there and take wizards if they're there, but so can the other players. But when they do, they have to pay you in some way, shape, or form to take wizards from your new building. Sometimes that is just straight up, they give you money. Sometimes that is, they get 2 of these, but you get 1 of your choice. Sometimes it's getting an influence card, which is usually you getting something or you playing nasty tricks on somebody else. If you see somebody is running away with the game, for example, you can use an intrigue card and give them what's called a mandatory quest, which immediately goes to the top of their quest log, and they cannot do any of their other quests until they do the mandatory quest first. Very annoying.
Yeah.
That happened to me, and I did the same thing to that player back. And people really like this game. Like, it's extremely popular. I had heard of it, hadn't had a chance to play it. I knew one of my friends had a copy. I did not know it was like his favorite game, and he had completely tricked it out. Because he had like a really nice wooden insert, and like he had bought these upgraded like nice metal coins, and usually when you go get these rogues and wizards and stuff, they're just colored cubes. He went and got little meeples, they're called. They look like little people, but like the wizard has like a little wizard staff, and nice. They're really cool. The fighter has like a sword that he's holding. It's pretty neat.
Is this game licensed by D&D?
It is.
Does it have the license on it?
It is. It does.
Okay. That stuff is kind of weird to me because I will see things where it's like, I know these are like Dungeons and Dragons like monsters and stuff like that, but this isn't a Dungeons and Dragons thing. Like, I mean, the first Final Fantasy is lousy with D&D characters, and I don't think there was ever any repercussions for that. And they have since become monsters that appear later on in Final Fantasy games.
Well, yeah, but they might not exactly look like the art is a little different, right? Like, now I go back and I look at, and I forget what they were called, but hey, that's a beholder, and there's no way you're telling me otherwise.
Yeah.
But whatever that monster is, I think it's appeared since then, and it does not look like a beholder anymore.
Okay. Yeah. Well, but weren't the 4 fiends from Final Fantasy 1 like straight out of like the D&D manual or something like that?
I don't know, actually.
I feel like I heard that somewhere. I don't know D&D either, but I always find the license to be interesting because it seems like there are things that use parts of it freely that aren't actually licensed, and I don't know how that works.
So some of it's tropes that kind of anybody can borrow, like just general high fantasy tropes, I guess. I'm not sure exactly which is which. But the other part of that is it was more about the art actually, I think in Japan it was more spot on. Here's another example, right? Like they straight up used a mind flayer. Like
Yeah,
but it wasn't called a mind flayer when they released it here. They called it a wizard, even though it had like an octopus head. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. And I think in Tactics it was the Pisco Demon, but then at some point it was Mind Flayer. Like I feel that I've played a version of it where it was straight up Mind Flayer. I might be misremembering that. It's all jumbled up in here.
Yeah. It's a trivia mess up in here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know a whole lot about the D&D universe, and how does it sound, even though I'm kind of a nerd, it's like that's become, like that's almost like the generic fantasy, like that is the rubber stamp from which all other rubber stamps are born. Right. You know, if that makes sense at all.
Oh, totally.
It's like Tolkien did his thing, and then D&D came over and said, "Hey, Tolkien, good job. Mind if I steal some of that?"
Yeah.
And he was dead, so he didn't care. And then, you know, D&D went and did what D&D did, and then everybody else spun off of that. It's like, I've seen so much of this before.
Yeah. I'm so jealous of people who get to play D&D, though. I loved the couple years that I played Pathfinder with a regular group. And to be fair, like Pathfinder, I think is an easier entry game. And also our DM was like very kind. You know, like I don't think we ever had a character die, even though I'm sure there were places where we totally died. But she was like, "Yeah, you're fine. You just really need healing right now." Where it's like another DM would have been like, "You're dead. You have to leave the game right now or roll another character." And it's like, you know. So I'm probably spoiled. So if I ever got with like the actual like hardcore group, like I probably wouldn't jive with them very well because I'd be like, my old DM would let me do this.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe that's part of the problem is I never played an RPG, like a real RPG, like sit around the table and throw dice at each other RPG.
Yeah,
with somebody who was running it who was good. Maybe that's the problem. But I'm also kind of like it would have to be the right person running it. It'd have to be with the right group because like I'm not going to overcommit to this, right? Like if you expect me to sit here and pretend I'm actually chanting spells, you have lost me, sir. Like I'm going to tell you, okay, Wizard Boy is going to do this if I'm playing a wizard, and that's as far as I'm going to get into it. Like, I'll come up with the lines he needs to say and this, that, and the other thing, but don't expect me to act this out in any way, shape, or form. I do not want to. And I almost wonder if that's part of the thing for people. Like, how far do they really get into this?
I think it depends. Like, my first character was basically just a carbon copy of my Final Fantasy XI character. He was just an elven warrior with the same name. And he was kind of just me, because that's also my Final Fantasy XI character. I just always, like, played him as me. But then we did, like, this one-off campaign where I created a dwarven paladin who was like always one step away from being kicked out of the order because he was like a lecherous drunk. And I had some fun with that because I was like doing the voice and I was like, "Oh, she looks really good in those pants," you know, like that type of stuff. And that was pretty fun. And I kind of wish we had kept going with that game because I was like, I think this is what it's supposed to be. And I was too timid when I made my first character, and I was having a lot more fun doing that, like making all of these terrible innuendo jokes that I make on a regular basis, but doing it through my character. Like, that was pretty neat. And if I could get a game together like that where people are cool with that stuff, like, I think there's something there. You know?
Yeah, might be.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd have to try it. And I think there's a bit of maybe shyness on my part that I might not be able to overcome and have a good time. I don't know.
Yeah. Like, if you and I lived in the same city, I would totally like have you and me like try to find a group somewhere because at least you and I like have a really good rapport and everything.
Sure.
And then we could work out like the rest of the group and then probably find a pretty good group, or maybe your sons would actually be up for that, and then we just need like a DM, because I definitely couldn't do that. I don't know enough about the game, but yeah, I just get jealous. Like I've been catching up on the TNB podcast, and Bob actually is running like 2 campaigns right now with 2 different groups, and it just sounds like a blast. And I'm like, oh, I don't have friends.
I would try, if somebody around here was playing Dark Heresy, I would absolutely. So that's the Warhammer 40K one, in case you were wondering.
Okay.
That's the role-playing game. So like, you're in the grimdark future and everybody's going to die.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. I would give that a shot, just because that world, to me, is still new and exciting. Like, is it fantasy? Yeah. But no, it's also just like hardcore sci-fi craziness. It's fresh and interesting to me now, so it would be a fun thing for me to explore. So I could probably get myself to try that particular world because of that.
Right.
Whereas the other one, it's like, do I really want to hide in somebody's basement and pretend to be an elf? Not really. That kind of thing.
I mean, one of my favorite stories from Pathfinder, this was like the second week that we played.
Sure.
My character ended up in a cellar with like a merchant's daughter, and she was coming on to me hard. I think she had gotten my pants off, and then I turned her down, and sure enough, like that's when her dad walked in, and I was fine. But my DM would put actually like a screen up with like the images of characters and stuff like that, and her wife was like, hold on a second. And she comes to me and she's like, look, the reason that people like us play games like this is so we can fantasize about being with girls like her.
That's pretty good.
I was like, okay, yeah, I get that.
Fair enough.
Yeah, but I mean, like it was like my second week. It was like all strangers except for one person. So, it's like I can't unleash the whole Julian on you right now. Like it comes over time.
You're not ready. Oh, jeez.
Sorry.
Well played.
I've got one other game to talk about, Angelo, but I forgot something that I wanted to tell you specifically from 14. Okay. I went ahead and upgraded to the digital collector's editions on all 3 of the expansions, which means that I got a crap ton of loot and mounts and nifty things. And there were 2 things in particular that you know my love for Final Fantasy IV. The first was a wind-up cane minion, because like in the game you can get these little minions that walk around behind you and they have little animations and stuff. But the description of it was so good, because it was like, it talked about Cane Highwind, Dragoon, blah, blah, blah. But the final line said, let this take you back to the days when 4 was 2. And I was like, that's
good. That's fantastic.
Then I got a mount, which I've always wanted. It's the Fat Chocobo. And if you haven't seen the Fat Chocobo, it's a thing of beauty, because he's fat and he waddles and he's got like little chicken wings, but also the way that you make him go is that you dangle like some Gishel greens in front of him, and he wants them so bad, but he can never get them. But they do a wonderful rendition of the Fat Chocobo theme from Final Fantasy IV, which I'm going to put in right here. It's just fantastic. Like, again, like all of the callbacks in 14 are just so pitch perfect. And every time that I'm playing on mic with my friend Shannon, I'm like, ha, look at him waddle. Look at him go. And she's like, is this going to be every time? And I'm like, yeah, probably.
But it's a fat chocobo. It has to be.
I love fat chocobos. My cat is fat. I love fat animals.
I had a fat cat too, and it was definitely my favorite cat.
Yeah.
I named him Chunk.
Nice. Last thing that I have, we might actually end up wrapping this up without Patrick, because we might be done. But I did want to talk a little bit about Metroid Samus Returns, I think, is the 3DS version. That game is good. I do not think that game is great. I remember, so you probably noticed, I mean, it's like their big selling point, but they added this melee counter mechanic.
Yeah, I saw the videos.
Yeah. Which I thought was like, when I first saw it, I was like, oh, that's kind of an interesting thing. Like, it kind of just like gives you some space. Like, when an enemy gets too close, you can knock it back and then like keep shooting it, which would have been fine. But what they ended up doing is most of the enemies basically lunge at you, and you have like this window of opportunity to counter, and then it stuns them, and you can fire back. And not only does Samus like auto target them, but you do like massive damage to them. So it becomes this thing where why wouldn't you do that?
Right.
Because one, like they're lunging at you, and sometimes they're coming at you faster than you can actually like aim and shoot or whatever. And two, it's going to take like far fewer shots to take them down, and you're going to get more energy and missile, refills from them when you do that. So it becomes this extra like annoyance with 90% of the enemies that you fight, and I'm 2 hours into it and I am beyond over it. It is sort of like Axiom Verge in the sense that I derive no pleasure from combat in this game. Because
that's a shame.
Yeah, and to compound that, check this control setup, Angelo.
Okay.
Because you remember we just talked about it. You talked about it last week with AM2R.
Yep.
Where it had the Super Metroid like angle up, angle down. Awesome. That's what you need. This one allows you to do like full 360-degree rotation with Samus, which I don't necessarily think that she needs. But you do that by holding down the L trigger, and then you can basically move her gun around. But in order to use missiles, you have to, it's not a toggle anymore. You have to hold down the R trigger to switch to missiles.
Okay.
Do you see the problem here?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. So when you're fighting like the Metroid bosses where, you're trying to aim very specifically and things like that, maybe this is just me, but I get into this very klutzy, like finger confusion where I'm toggling back and forth on accident between missile and regular beam, or I'm accidentally switching between stationary movement and moving freely. And so I'm running into things. I'm falling into pits. Right. I'm not hitting it with the missiles that I want to hit it with. And it's like, they didn't need to, it didn't have to be this way, guys. Like, select is still there. Just hit select, have it be a toggle for missile. Problem solved. And
the other problem with having to do like the two triggers like that is it makes it. This isn't a problem with controllers because controllers have those really nice grips to them. But with a DS, when you're already holding it like on those slim sides and you're already using your thumbs for this, once you take both of your index fingers out from behind the Game Boy, the DS, and put them on the triggers, I feel like it's more apt to slip out of my hands. Yeah. I'm not a fan of the way it feels. I'm not really a fan of the way it moves. Right. But it's still being built on like an excellent framework, and you can't take that away. Like it's still Metroid 2, and it's still a great game. The framework is great. I don't think I think that the trappings of this one leave something to be desired. And I need to go back and play the Game Boy version, but I am not feeling the music at all in this game. And I don't know if that was just like the actual original Game Boy music was kind of lackluster, and this is too, or if it's just lackluster in general. I can answer that question for you. There is one theme in Metroid 2, and it's when you're in I don't know how the remake is built out, but in the original game, there's like a pool of acid, right? And every time you kill a number of the Metroids, the acid gets lower. Yeah. When you're in that central corridor where the acid is, it plays a theme. Yeah, okay. But when you're off to the side, it's just weird ambient music.
Yeah, okay, and that's what this is, and I'm not feeling it whatsoever. And that may have been something where maybe they shouldn't have been as slavish to the source material, maybe tried to do some more Metroid-y music. Because I've actually started like wanting to play it with just like listening to a podcast, because I'm also not digging the sound effects. I'm like, I could probably just play this with the volume down, honestly. Like, I'm not getting anything from this.
Yeah. The first two Metroid games are more or less like that, actually. Like even the one on the NES, if I remember correctly, didn't have. Was it? Maybe I'm wrong.
You've got there's the theme song, obviously, but then you've got the Norfair is very distinct, and then I guess it's deeper in Brinstar with the
Yep.
And that one's really good.
I think I might be confused. Maybe I'm thinking of the Japanese version that had weird beeps and bloops, and they actually made it more musical for the West. Could be wrong. I could be completely wrong about this because the original Metroid is not really something I have a whole lot of connection to.
Yeah.
I didn't really get on board with it until Metroid 2 and especially Super Metroid,
Yeah.
So
I haven't played all the way through Metroid in a very long time, where Super Metroid I've played, tons and tons over and over. And that's the thing is that, like, even though that's my favorite game, I'm not necessarily like the biggest Metroid fan. Like, right. I like Metroid 1 and 2. I love Super Metroid. I like Metroid Prime. And then I didn't even bother with Prime 2 or 3 or Other M, So Metroid Prime 4's announcement, I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot, I guess. If they're doing just another Metroid Prime game, I wish that they were doing something different. Right. I still want my third person behind the back 3D Metroid game. I think that you could do some interesting stuff with those mechanics in that perspective. Because, you don't want to do the space jump and the screw attack in 3D or in first person, but you can do that in third person just fine.
Right.
So
makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still have the Wii one on my shelf, unplayed. I'm working up the nerve to play it. I do want to play it. I've heard the game mechanically is fine. It's just everything they did with Samus as a character is kind of horrible.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny because, I keep eyeing that game as well, because I've bought a lot of Wii games recently. I'm like, I need to, fire up my Wii and, blow through a couple of these games, because I think they're worth playing.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Also, justify the purchase.
I've got so many games on my shelf that I haven't played. I'm just looking, especially PS2, because when the PS2 games got real cheap, because I had missed out on so much of that generation, I just said, I have a PS3 now, so I bought a ton of them.
Yeah.
And then, they recently they started going back up, but I think I got a lot of them. Pretty good price.
Are you gonna double dip on Dragon's Crown?
No, I don't think so. I really like that game, but I didn't really see, what did they do different with it? Is it just now it's in higher res?
Yeah. Sort of like, I think basically their assets were already done in stupid high resolution originally. And so now they can basically display it in the way that the art originally was. Sort of like what they did with Odin Sphere on PS4.
Yeah. When you put it like that, I kind of want to get it now.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it. I just hate rebuying games that I've barely played, but
yeah,
I have a problem, Angelo.
That is such a pretty game, though.
It is.
Both of them are. That and Odin Sphere. I bought the big collector's edition of Odin Sphere 2. Probably the biggest box on my shelf.
It had some good stuff in there, though.
It did. It had that T-shirt.
Oh, is there a T-shirt in there?
There was a T-shirt that had crap. It's the most basic recipe you learn in that game, but now I can't think of it. There was just that equals and then whatever, the potion you made.
That's pretty cool. I wish I still had my T-shirt from my Japanese Metal Gear Solid Premium Pack.
Yeah.
But I actually wore it even though it barely fit me because it was a Japanese extra large. Basically Hot Topic extra large.
Yeah.
Are we done?
I think we're done. We could.
I've got one last thing.
Sure.
Because I actually asked for Twitter questions and we got a singular question. So may as well hit it up. It's actually two questions from one person.
Okay.
This comes from Matt Jorgensen, at Matt Jorgensen 92, who, he's become a staunch supporter of the Nerds Without Pants. And I really enjoy talking to him online. Question 1. Would you consider a Nerds Without Pants Facebook group or Discord? We actually have a Facebook group. I just never do anything with it. We've had it for years. Hold on, I'm going to go look that up real quick.
I wonder if there's a whole bunch of questions on there and they're all wondering why aren't you guys getting to us?
No, because I would get the notifications if anybody actually did anything on it. All right. So if you're curious, you can go to facebook.com/nerdswithoutpantspodcasts. And that's our thing. I don't even remember the last, 2015 is the last time I posted something on there. But, if people start liking it and posting stuff on there, like, I'll do stuff with it. It's more of just like, I kind of feel like Facebook is kind of rapidly going by the wayside, and I feel like it's much easier to interact with people on Twitter. But, like I'm on the Square Roots Facebook group, and that thing is hella active. And so I almost feel like if you like Nerds Without Pants, you should just join there. But feel free to go over and like it and throw up a note on there or something, and I'll see it. And maybe it'll spur me on to do some more stuff with it. I'd also kicked around the idea of doing a Tumblr page, but I don't really know what I would put on there other than just the podcast. And I don't like things where it's like nothing but self-promotion. Like, I'm trying very hard not to make the Nerds Without Pants Twitter page that. And I'm failing at that right now, but I don't want to just be like, oh, here's our new episode, and then we don't tweet again for 2 weeks. So I gotta figure out more things to do with that. As far as Discord, like, what do they do the Discord thing with, Angelo? Like,
it's chat. It's like a chat group.
Oh.
Have you ever used it?
No, I haven't.
Oh yeah,
I thought it was just for playing like RPGs online and stuff like that.
No, it's I can probably go into a little more detail later, but like, I have several groups that I mentioned Pixelated Audio before.
Mm-hmm.
I'm part of their group. Part of Digital and Dice. Hi guys. Yeah. And, it's basically a chat thing. And a lot of people use it to be, to talk while they're playing games and stuff like that. There's a voice, chat built into it. And that's basically what it's for. It's basically like, geek networking stuff. It's pretty cool. It's, I maybe.
My thing is that I'm not confident in our collective ability to keep that going. I'm a pretty shy person in general, so I don't know much what I would say. And then Patrick, I doubt would do anything with it. Like, Patrick and Angelo both have the Nerds Without Pants Twitter access, but I'm the one that tweets like 99% of the stuff on there. Like, every once in a while, Patrick will get a wild hair up his ass and he'll tweet something.
I could probably. Well, my problem is I hate signing in and out of accounts. Like, that's why I don't end up doing it, which is kind of stupid. But if we set up a Discord, you could just make me a mod on it, and I'd actually probably get the alerts on my phone. There's a Discord app too. So,
well, maybe if we get enough feedback on that, if it's something that people are interested in. Second question is very simple. Everyone's favorite color and why? Angelo, what's your favorite color?
Orange.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. I never would have expected that.
It is.
I had you pegged for a blue, easy.
Yeah. My kids, oddly enough, their favorite colors are blue and red. So it's always
player
red
one
versus
player
blue
two.
In my house. It's fun. But yeah, no, orange. And I don't know why. I've always liked it, like, ever since I was a small child.
Interesting.
Yeah. That's it. That's all I got.
I don't necessarily have a favorite color, but I always gravitate towards greens, just in various hues. Like, for example, on 14, I almost always dye my Dragoon armor in various types of green. But then for my samurai armor, I do those in red and black. So I don't know. The funny thing is that I've tried to get a forest green car 3 times now, and I've been thwarted every single time. Because, so the first time, my first new car was a Honda Accord, and I really wanted forest green. But they were going to have to, bring it in from, Houston or something. It was going to take, a week, and it was, a thing where it's, I needed the car then. So I got a silver one. That car got totaled, a year later, and so ended up getting another one. Same thing, forest green, they had it, but it was, North Texas or something. It was going to be, days, and this was, an emergency situation, literally, I didn't have a car and I needed to get to work, and I was like, I'll just take the black one. Right. And then same thing with my current car. It's a Kia Soul. and I really love the forest green Kia Soul. But again, they didn't have it anywhere, and I was like, I'll just take the neon green because that's kind of cool too.
Yeah.
And I really do dig the neon green one, but it's just never happened for me.
It is hard to find a good-looking orange car, as it turns out.
Yeah. Charger looks good in orange.
There's two that I have liked. Well, first of all, I had a Mitsubishi Spider, black on black, a while ago. And the dashboard on that was all orange. And that was kind of cool. Because it was just like, kind of gave it that fast race feel a little bit.
Yeah.
But the two things I've seen, of course, Dodge Chargers look good in that. But also Jeep Wranglers. There's a shade of orange that's kind of gaudy, but there's one that's more of a burnt orange. That's pretty nice.
Nice.
I could end up with one of those. But I don't know if I could because it's also Jeep and they're terrible on gas.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like, I've talked to some people that are into Jeeps, and people that are into Jeeps are really into Jeeps. Like, that's a cult.
Yeah. And I feel like you being a family man, like, that's not really like a family man car. Like, to me, that's like a 20s hipster who's always, like, going surfing or camping type of car.
That's where it would work, is because, well, they do have the big 4-door ones, and we like to camp. So it does kind of work. Like I could actually probably pull a pop-up with one of the bigger ones.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm kind of like, I'm always back and forth on that.
Yeah.
Just because I feel like it's a committal. It would be like, for me doing that would be like, I don't know, you becoming a juggalo or something. Like it's making a leap into something that isn't quite me, but I kind of want to do it. I don't know. I mean, that's probably. Yeah.
I gotta say, like, the Kia Soul is right where I'm at. Like, it's a really fun little car, and it's like the TARDIS because it feels bigger on the inside. And it's a great road trip car, and it's just really comfy. Like, rides really well. So, if you're ever in the market, and they're cheap too, so that's also nice.
Yeah, my wife has a Honda Accord, and that is a great family car.
Oh, yeah. My family is a Honda family, and the only reason that I didn't buy a Honda this time is because in the 12 years between when I got my Accord, they became luxury vehicles. And like the prices they skyrocketed on them. I was like, I can't do that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a long story there, but we had one. It was the exact same situation we were talking about. I got a really good deal on one, and I was all excited about it. And we didn't have it long enough to get the oil changed on it before an elderly gentleman took an illegal left-hand turn and appeared in front of us.
Yeah.
And actually one of the reasons we bought another one of those was because the car literally appeared in front of us and we were doing 30 miles an hour plus and just smashed the front end into it, not a scratch on anybody. Like, it did so well in the crash that we were like, I feel pretty safe with getting another one of these.
Yeah.
So
they'll last you forever too. I mean, I bought my car new and I put a ton of miles on it in 12 years and I ran it into the ground. But I mean, I got my money's worth out of that car. It went everywhere. So, Car Talk with Angelo and Julian, new spin-off podcast. I will say real quick to finish off Matt's question, when I'm wearing like business attire and like in the office and stuff like that, I love solid colors, both for my dress shirts and my ties. And it's very hard to find solid colors, but when I find them, I stock up. And so I've got this nice array of like really bright, bold, solid colors. And that's what I like. And I just hate stripes and I hate, I don't know, two-tone, and I hate the crissy-crossy designs on most of the ties and stuff. I just like bold, bright, singular colors. So
also, as it turns out, orange button-down dress shirts don't really work for me.
Yeah, it's a rough favorite color to have.
Yeah. Well, it's just not one that you really get to wear.
Yeah,
you can have favorite colors that you don't wear or paint your walls with. Or have in a car. When we play board games, I try to go for orange if that color's available. That's about all I can really say.
There you go.
That's about it, though.
All right, it's time to end this. We started strong, and then at some point we lost our way. No, it was fun. It's a good episode. So I'm going to try to get this up a little earlier or a little faster than normal because it's a quick episode. Won't take me long to edit. So, Angelo, we're recording again next week, but let's remind everybody what we're doing for Stage Select.
Right. We want to know and have fun with this, guys. Don't be mean, but maybe be mean. I don't know. Have fun. We want to know your 3 most overrated games. Video games, obviously.
Yes. And then for Chrono Crossing, we want your favorite game from 1988. I'm going to have to actually re-look at that list because we're getting some entries in where I'm like, ooh, I need to look again because I thought I had it locked in. But again, it's getting a little trickier with the Chrono Crossing stuff. And also, I'll say, just looking at the early submissions to Pixelbit for the next episode, this is going to be fun. I've already gotten 2 of my overrated games locked in. It's number 3 that I'm struggling with. So look forward to that. Again, if you can get those submitted to us by 8:30 Central Time on October the 5th. Again, you can go to pixelbit.com and you can either comment in the show thread for episode 120 or this special edition. Either way works. Or you can hit us up on Twitter at NWPcast. You can either send us a tweet directly or you can send us a DM if it's a longer submission that you want to give. I would like to know, why these games are overrated to you. Some of them people will just list off the stuff, but this I think needs a little more explanation. We've gotten some really good explanations on the ones that we've gotten so far. So, because some of them cut deep, Angelo. So
I think I might hurt you a little bit too.
You might. And I'm the one that I'm thinking about for number 3 might surprise a lot of people.
Yeah. 2 out of the 3 games on here, I will tell people that I absolutely love, but I just think the way people talk about them drives me nuts, and they're way, it's just overrated, honestly.
Yeah. And that's fair. That's definitely fair. So, we look forward to those. In addition, you can always hit us up on Twitter. Angelo?
I am at a roguish ham.
You can find me at Julian_Titus. You can find Patrick at some boss, and also he just came on. Again, Facebook.com/NerdsWithoutPants podcast if you want to go do that. And, I'll take a look at it. I'll get the notifications if people are messing around with it. And then I'll decide if there's enough interest in me actually keeping that going. But until then, for myself, Angelo, and saying a shout out to Patrick who just logged on. Thanks for listening and keep it pantsless, Internet. Goodbye.